Thank you so much for being here. This is Choose Your Fighter, Automation versus Manual Processes in the ILS. We're going to go through the fighters out of order. I hope y'all can cope. My name is Tina Buck. I'm the Department Head for Acquisitions and Collection Services at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. And my colleagues will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sara Duff. I'm the Acquisitions and Collection Assessment Librarian at the University of Central Florida.
And I'm Natalie Henri-Bennett, the Electronic Resources and Discovery Librarian at Auburn University.
Our former colleague, Faye Mazzia, I might be pronouncing that wrong, contributed to the presentation, but she has chosen to pursue other opportunities, so she is not with us today. All right, so I'm going to start talking, give you a little introduction to University of Central Florida. The key word to describe us is large. Our enrollment is currently about 70,000. Our FTE is something in the range of 68,000. The university has about 240 degrees from undergrad to doctoral programs covering a very wide range of topics and disciplines. Naturally, we need the electronic resources to support all those folks doing their research and teaching. We have we have a chronic shortage of librarians and staff. It's been that way ever since I got to UCF 8 years ago. I think it was like that before I arrived. I don't really foresee it changing. And the last fact is that we are an Alma Primo instance in a large academic consortia. FLVC or FALSI is the Florida State College and University Consortia. We have 28 state colleges and 12 state universities. And we migrated to Alma Primo about 2.5 years ago. So we're going to start with fighter number 2, and that is the community zone in Alma and vendor supplied data. So the community zone is a part of Alma that is available to all Alma libraries, and it contains record sets that are provided mostly by vendors and publishers. And those record sets include bibliographic data, the link to the item, coverage dates for things like journals. And the record sets can be defined packages. Say you bought an ebook set, you're entitled to all those ebooks, or it can be the entire catalog of all of a publisher's journals, all of a publisher's ebooks, some subset of streaming videos, etc. And the librarian can choose whether you're going to activate that entire package or if there's like 3 journals from Ingenta that you need to activate. So you activate those things in the CZ. They move into the IZ, the institution zone, which is essentially your catalog, and they display, if you so choose, in Primo, your discovery layer, just like that. Or sometimes there's a little bit of delay while things index to display in Primo, but that's all you have to do, is to activate these things. The other piece of information to know about the community zone is that your catalogers can enhance and edit those bibs. That is available to them. So what are the benefits of the community zone or the CZ? Record URLs and all the information is maintained by the vendor. So if the vendor changes their URL structure, no more crazy batch updating for us. If there's a brief bib record that comes in right after something is published and it's later enhanced to a full record, happens automatically. Our catalogers do not need to spend time manually hunting down record sets and loading them or replacing an old record set with a new one. Their time is freed up to do stuff that is more suitable to that high skill set. Another benefit is the speed of access. There's a lot of manual processes that we no longer have to do, So our e-resources are available to our patrons more quickly as soon as that data goes into Alma. I should back up a step. If we activate a collection, say we've bought a 2024 ebook package, and that's going to be published over the course of the whole calendar year, we can tell Alma, turn those titles on automatically. We are entitled to this whole collection. So we don't have to go back over the course of the whole year and remember to turn on all the new titles. You don't have to set up that calendar for yourself of checking every month or every week or whatever it is. What are the drawbacks of the CZ? Sometimes the records aren't what you would like. Sometimes the bibliographic data is not what you would like. Some vendors, for reasons that are seriously beyond us, they're not putting in accurate URLs. It can take time for new titles to appear. As soon as something gets published, we want a good quality bib record in there. And it doesn't always happen as quickly as that. As I mentioned, sometimes the links don't work. We have a little short list of vendors whose data we don't trust, sadly. You do give up some control. With your manual processes, you have a lot of control. We have given up a lot of control in favor of the automation doing a lot of work for us. Frankly, that has worked out pretty well. We do not have the people to manually touch every bib record, whether it's looking at the cataloging, verifying the link, or verifying coverage dates for journals. If there are problems or errors, we deal with things as they come up, and that is working out fine. Sometimes, and this is probably the most prevalent problem that we hit, sometimes it is hard to find the package that you are entitled to. The thing that you bought from your salesperson, the thing that's written down on your invoice, is not necessarily what you're seeing in the CZ. And that's frustrating because it's frustrating because it's ridiculous. You should be able to find the thing that you bought. My understanding is that there is a standard for that in the works with an ISO working group, so hopefully that will be resolved with a standard number like an ISBN or an ISSN for packages. But in the meantime, if we can't find what we're looking for, we reach out to our sales rep and hassle them a little bit, and they figure it out for us. So what is the ideal world for the community zone? Quality. All the data needs to be consistently good. It needs to be well maintained and frequently maintained. We want all of our vendors to participate, and we want them all to take this seriously because this is a serious workflow enhancement for us. We really need this. And we think that they need it, or if you're a vendor, we think you need it as well, because that's the first place that most of our patrons are going to encounter your materials. A good strong bib telling them what this thing is and a link that works speaks very well for the vendor. Essentially, we think this is the new normal. We want data to be loaded into the ILS ASAP, and we want all formats. Right now, journals are probably the most consistently present. Ebooks are pretty good. Streaming videos, not terrible, but not great. And other formats are emerging, let's say. We want the best quality MARC records to go into the ILS. We have one vendor that we've sort of been wrangling with because they put great quality MARC records in their vendor admin where the catalogers log in, but what goes into the ILS can be, I wouldn't even call it a bib record, it's a title and ISBN. So we want all that great metadata right into the ILS. That's where we need to find it. And we want our vendors to recognize that the ILS is a critical discovery layer. That's where patrons discover products. And you can have the best vendor platform in the world, but if our patrons aren't finding it, it doesn't really matter. So that's Fighter 2, Community Zone and Vendor Supplied Data. We're now going to move on to Fighter number 1, which is kind of a notch beyond Fighter number 2, and it is called KBART Automation or Auto Holdings. So KBART stands for Knowledge Base and Related Tools. The original KBART recommended practice was developed by NISO in 2010, and it identified a standard set of metadata to facilitate information transfer from publishers to librarians to the vendors who run our ILSs, or more specifically our knowledge bases. Because it was, back up a step, its most basic goal was back then improving linking accuracy, and it originally included only journal data, and that's why it was looking specifically at knowledge bases. If you're around my generation, you remember when the only way you could find that journal list was there was a separate journal list. It wasn't necessarily integrated into your ILS. That was where the start of NISO was, let's improve journal linking. But it has evolved since then. It now includes data about ebooks in a release that was around 2014, and other improvements have occurred as well. Most recently, I think 2019 was KBART automation, AKA auto holdings in ALMA. And this is also a recommended practice from NISO, and it's a practice for those standard sets of metadata to move without having to go to the librarians as the middle people. It goes from the vendors who have our entitlements directly into our ILS, our catalog. They know our entitlements, so take that standard data, pop it right into the ILS, and just make that automatic. Whenever we buy something, turn it on, add the bib record, add the link. Let's stop this manual handling for things that don't need it. Once we have set up auto holdings per publisher, it happens automatically. So for instance, we buy a Springer ebook, we have to go through the acquisitions process, but it turns on in our catalog and it turns on in our discovery layer automatically. We don't have to stop and do anything. Let's see if I know how to scroll my notes down so I know what I want to say to you. So UCF has KBART automation set up in ALMA for every publisher that currently provides it. So for us, that is Elsevier, Springer Nature, Ovid, and Wiley for both journals and ebooks, and ProQuest and Taylor and Francis just for ebooks. KBART automation currently only supports journal and ebook data. So that is what is available. But as I said, the advantage to this is if our Elsevier journal package changes at the change of the year, journals cease, journals go to other publishers, new journals come in, journals split, we don't have to worry about that. That happens automatically. The auto holdings run once a week or once a month, depending on the sort of schedule that the publisher has permitted. But we can also run a manual update if we need to do that for some reason. As I said, KBART automation only includes journals and ebooks at this point, but there's a NISO working group that's looking to develop KBART Phase 3. And UCF is cheering loudly from the sidelines for the part of their charge that includes looking at adding new formats. We really, really, really want the streaming videos to get in there because that's such an important part of our collection these days. And we could definitely use the help with getting that content, good bib records, good links, automatically activated. It's an incredibly high demand area for us right now. So what is the benefit to our different constituencies? For the librarian, it is time. The amount of time that this saves us is unbelievable. When we were in our previous ILS that didn't do KBART automation, I had to devote an entire staff person to managing our journal knowledge base. So the journal package changes that I just mentioned, managing our journal, the one-off subscriptions that we had, it was an entire person, and that doesn't even include the amount of loading and changing of bib records that our electronic resources cataloger needed to do. So it was actually more than a full person. But all of that seems so unnecessary because we're the middleman. The vendor has that data. It goes into the ILS. Why do we have to devote that much human power to it in the library? So for us, there's a massive savings in time. What's the benefit to the user? Resources are available very quickly. Typically, it's right. It is what we are entitled to. There's not the amount of human error that we're going to have if we have to mediate that because the vendor, as I said, the vendor has our entitlements. Let's just plop that right into the ILS. So users get what we're entitled to and they get it quickly. What's the benefit to the publisher or the vendor? I think this sort of mechanism sets up the best possible situation to create great usage. And if what everybody collectively is looking for is to help patrons make maximal use of our resources, this is absolutely the way to go, in my opinion. So are there drawbacks? Frankly, I have not found any. If there is a problem, if we have something in our catalog that we're not actually entitled to, or if we're not finding something that we are entitled to, typically we'll just do a manual run of a package, which is maybe 5 minutes. You get into the config area of Alma, you click a few buttons. It's not like I have to go find another KBART set or something like that. It's just telling the system to do a rerun, and that typically resolves the problem. We need to reach out to our vendors with issues pretty infrequently. So what would the ideal be? Everybody, all the publishers participating. We're pushing really hard for all of our journal and ebook vendors to adopt KBART automation. We understand that it's an expense. It's an investment. I think it's a cost of doing business, the same way that providing MARC records or attending a conference or being able to hop on a video call is. This is, it used to be a billion years ago that providing MARC records was like, we can't afford to do that. And now it's pretty standard. You would kind of raise your eyebrows at a vendor who said, oh no, we don't provide MARC records. This is the new standard. We also want this to be all formats. As I said, right now it's only journals and ebooks, and that's a big part of our collection, but there's other stuff. We have streaming videos, we have primary source materials, and it would be great if there's more stuff that we could set up in an automated way. Another ideal is another piece of data that I would like in there, which is, for instance, with ebooks, we have subscriptions, we have purchase titles, and we have demand-driven type packages. And right now, the only vendor who supplies that with the KBART data is ProQuest. We suspect because they own Ex Libris. But it would be really helpful if that information would come in with all data types. Like faculty who teach using library supply textbooks would love to know if something was purchased and like solidly ours. It would also help us in acquisitions in terms of statistics and collection management and that kind of thing. And that's it for fighter number 1. I'll now turn it over to Sara for fighter number 3.
Hi, thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about integrated ordering platforms. So I'm mostly going to be focusing on Rialto because that is what is integrated into Alma. However, a lot of this will sound familiar if you use APIs for your ordering. So I just want to acknowledge that. I am just focusing on Rialto essentially because that's what we're using. But if you're using APIs, you're doing some similar things. Okay, so we went live in Alma in 2021, summer of 2021, I think July. And we decided to implement Rialto pretty quickly thereafter because my staff was already learning brand new workflows. It was so drastically different from our other system, particularly on how it dealt with e-resources and ebooks. So we figured, why not add another new thing to learn before you really get set in your ways? So we started implementing Rialto in January of 2022, and we were live in February. The implementation went pretty quick, And they were very hands-on. Ex Libris was very hands-on with that, and it went very smoothly. I was really impressed with how quickly it went. So February 2022 is a very busy time in acquisitions when you have your fiscal year ending in June. I usually have my selectors completely finish their ordering by the end of March. So I did not want to launch this in February 2022 on everybody, all my selectors. We have quite a few. I did not want my staff to be fielding a million questions a day on this. So instead, I asked for volunteers for my selectors, and I thought this might be a way to get buy-in from them, because I'm forcing them to learn yet another system, another vendor system for selection. So that actually worked really well for me. I had some very brave souls who wanted to be my early adopters, and it worked great because they were very enthusiastic, and then they got the other selectors on board. Essentially, I didn't really have to work very hard to get buy-in, which is great. So then for the new fiscal year, then I had all my selectors essentially forced to use Rialto instead. So here's the process, essentially. The selector is in Rialto, which is inside of Alma, which worked great for us because most of our selectors did not have Alma accounts. So this was sort of a backdoor way for them to get into Alma and see some of this data. When they find a title, they send it for approval. Because Rialto is in Alma, it displays matches, if there are any, for our Alma holdings. When it works smoothly, that is what it does. The acquisition staff then can view all this, kind of see the whole snapshot, see is it in our holdings, if so, what format, what edition, that sort of thing. And then they can just approve if everything looks correct. They just click a button. When they do that, the order is automatically created and the bib is brought in. So all of this that was a manual process for my staff before is just automatic. Typically, that's a brief bib when it creates the POL if it's bringing in a record. But when it's shipped, quote unquote shipped for ebooks, but for physical books as well, then the full record is typically overlaid. In our case, we decided we wanted to use the CZ Community Zone records for our ebooks and keep those in our IZ instance of the CZ, if that makes sense to you. But you don't have to do it that way. You can do it whichever way you want. And then once the access is on for the ebooks, they are automatically activated in Alma, so we don't have to have someone go in and activate new ebooks. That happens automatically. And then the invoice comes in via EDI, which is great. So all of this works really well for my staff because they were doing every single one of these manually before. We did not have an API set up before. We did not have, on the monograph side, we did not have EDI invoices. The first time I explained to them what the EDI invoice would do, they were like, oh, mind blown. They were so thrilled. So it was a really easy sell for my staff because they saw immediately how it was going to save them time and reduce, those mistakes from human error if you have to go in and add every POL to your invoice. And that allowed them to focus on other tasks like cleanup and focusing on, canceled titles or titles that are out of print and can't be supplied by Rialto and that sort of thing. And then the other thing I really want to mention is we have several evidence-based plans. We have some that are outside of Rialto directly with the vendors, and then we have, I think we have 5 right now that are inside of Rialto, run via ProQuest. Most of those are on eBooks Central with various publishers, the eBooks Central version of their books, but one is a publisher EBA run through Rialto. And the EBA integration has saved me so much time and effort. It's really been fantastic. I used to have to keep a separate spreadsheet for each EBA that we had, and when someone wanted me to make sure you select this book or we really need to keep this one, I would have to keep track of it manually, individually, then I would have to consult this at the end. With the EBA, the selectors can do that themselves. They can, when it pops up in the marketplace, they can just click a little button, they can write me a note if they want, but they don't have to. And then at the end, I can go and see, oh, okay, these are all the ones my selector wants to make sure that I keep. So that's really been great. Okay, so it's not perfect. As much as I love it, it isn't perfect. There are problems. Sometimes the system does have trouble overlaying the record, and then you end up with 2 records, which is, not ideal. It's not the end of the world because the full record is there, so people are still able to find it. Your users are still able to find it. But, you want your order record to be on the right record. You want all that to be clean. Sometimes in Rialto, there have been metadata issues, particularly related to the editions. So Rialto has a tendency to just kind of push all the editions of a particular book together in one area and say, they'll flag it as, oh, you already own this. Well, we own the 1st edition. This is the 8th edition or something that we're trying to order. So something to be mindful of. Occasionally there can be a delay in the ebook activation part. Usually not. Usually it's pretty quick. But there is a report that they built out of the box that I check, and sometimes there is a strange delay. And there have been a couple that have taken a couple weeks, even though our access is on. So that is something that I do have to keep an eye on. And the records aren't always perfect, especially if you're getting them from the CZ. It's not always ideal, but typically they're good enough for us. And so far, we have just been doing the firm orders and the EBAs. We're testing approvals. We're not quite ready to launch it yet, but we're looking at it. And we would like to do standing orders and experiment with that. We've been in talks about that, but I think Rialto is not quite ready for that. And we would love to do package purchasing and that sort of thing, ebook packages as well, but they're not ready for that either. But they do have reports that can identify a lot of these issues I just mentioned. So it's just a matter of keeping on top of it. All right, well, what do we want? Well, we want everything to be perfect, right? I want the perfect records. I want them to be activated immediately as soon as our access is on. I want the metadata to be perfect, right? Well, okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. And I do want to be able to do all of our various monograph acquisitions in the same place, because right now it is a little fragmented. We have our approvals one place, our standing orders, kind of scattered to the winds. We have ebook packages all over. So I would like to have kind of a central place to do it all and to kind of eliminate some duplication that we're seeing. It is challenging when you have approvals coming from another vendor and you have people firm ordering over here. Sometimes you're not going to catch them in time. And I really want a way for us to, when a selector has marked a new edition, Rialto's identifying the older editions when they do that. We see them right there. So we would really like to be able to mark those from that screen and say, yeah, when this arrives, let's withdraw these. Let's put these in the withdrawal process. But right now, that kind of thing is not possible. But maybe in the future. All right, so next up is Natalie.
Hello. Okay, Auburn University is home to nearly 30,000 full-time students. Our library collection contains 7.5 million volumes, and we provide access to approximately 230 electronic databases. Hang on. There we go. Auburn uses Voyager for its ILS, EBSCO Discovery for its discovery tool, and ViewFind as the catalog. Like many libraries, our tech services staff has been in decline. We now employ 2 full-time catalogers, one for electronic, one for print. We migrated to EDS in August 2019 and filled the discovery librarian position in 2020. So in the beginning, I expected that we would represent both the manual workflow path, the Fighter 4, and some of the automated processes, because EDS does provide some tools to shorten the amount of time spent on manual maintenance. But these rise to the level, but none of these rise to the level of full automation, which implies that human intervention is not required. So here's our workflow. Much of our work still requires our intervention. We recently instituted a new service that I thought would be a turnkey replacement for some of these workflows. Unfortunately, our setup did not allow for this. Our new service through OCLC provides record sets for electronic firm orders and approvals. And it seemed a no-brainer that we would be able to create a loading process and move on. Unfortunately, our ILS Voyager cannot automate holdings records creation, so these records still need to be manually loaded. We still save time due to the new service, but not as much as we could. These are the processes EDS automates. Purchases made through EBSCOnet are automatically activated in EDS, as are the holdings data for purchases made through Gobi. Purchases through other vendors are added and maintained by the customer, us. But even processes that seem straightforward can be derailed. Hold on. I think I missed a slide here. I'm in the wrong spot. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay, that's where I was. My apologies. Okay. So take this recent case where a journal we had access to was not showing, we had the subscription to, was not showing as available. The article show in the results set was actually ours. I tested it with the DOI. So we're going to go and explain why I wasn't able to have it show up in our discovery instance as belonging to us. This journal has seen several title changes, and HLM cannot automatically reflect these. Titles that are selected stand alone, so the references to preceding and succeeding titles are not put into this metadata. So this is what that journal looks like. Even if this title was automatically selected in HLM, we purchased it, and we purchased it. The system knows only the coverage data from that purchase. So other titles are represented in publishing that are represented in the publishing history need to be automatically manually selected. This is why the article didn't show in the original search. So EDS supports holdings upload. I'm sorry. Currently, EBSCO only provides KBART support for the vendor side. Vendor resources that populate the KB. Customer-facing access is currently not available. EDS does support a holdings upload process that is similar to KBART, but not as effective. The file upload uses an internally designed, internally assigned identifier known as the KBID. As the primary match point. There is no directory where we can find the numbers for the majority of so the majority of these records fail to match in the HLM. For all these reasons, we are Fighter 4, depending primarily on MARC loads. Let's look at this recent project. Here we go. So I needed to address some record gaps in our catalog for several Elsevier Science Direct collections. I quickly located some sets in OCLC. Two sets I searched were methods in enzymology and methods in cell biology. And I thought the rest would be simple. This was not the case. So yeah, none of the other sets were actually existed as a collection in OCLC. I also checked holdings management and came up empty-handed as well. So go through this really briefly. So this is what I did for to handle this. So I went into connection. I searched by series title. I selected the date ranges, and then selected the materials that we held, and exported that into the local file and then loaded it into Discovery, or into the catalog. I use this to illustrate the complexity of record selection and MARC record acquisition to maintain our e-resources. So what are the benefits? Well, we have the ability to create, modify, and group our records and data however we like. Control is the best, is the most, is the benefit here. What is the ideal scenario? Well, this scenario actually relates mostly to EDS, but everyone else as well. This is, hang on a second. I'm sorry, I skipped that. Okay, I skipped that. Why is it doing this? I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah, so this is time-consuming work, verifying content and editing records to meet local requirements. Costs a lot of time. This work leaves less time for record creation. Fighting with the computer. Okay, ideally we would like to see KBART standards adopted by all entities involved. The ability to verify the metadata and that supports the records we select. We would really like to be able to see that before we make the selections in HLM. And since so many librarians are doing work in HLM in that platform, I'd like to see a area where we could collaborate and create better record sets and better metadata. And this, yeah, to enhance discoverability. And we'd like to see a minimum standard for all data fields. So here is a synopsis of all our ideal scenarios. And thank you. And does anyone have questions? I'm going to go over there. And if we do, there is a microphone